The job posting was buried on page 12 of L'Osservatore Romano, printed in Latin between advertisements for religious artifacts and monastery supplies. Specialized mortuary services required. Vatican City. Discretionary work. Exceptional compensation. Must possess advanced preservation techniques and absolute confidentiality. What it didn't mention was that I would be preparing bodies that had been dead for centuries, but somehow still required my services. I found out about the true nature of the work 6 weeks into my employment. Monsignor Toretti had been observing my routine maintenance of the standard Vatican mortuary when he approached with a brass key and a leather portfolio sealed with wax. "Marco," he said, his voice barely above a whisper, "you have demonstrated exceptional skill with our traditional obligations. Tonight, you begin your real purpose here." The portfolio contained 7 rules, handwritten in Latin, Italian, English, and 3 scripts I couldn't identify. Each rule was numbered and bordered with symbols that hurt my eyes to look at directly. Monsignor Toretti made me recite them in Latin 3 times before allowing me to continue. Rule 1. Never work on more than 1 body at a time. Complete all preservation procedures before moving to the next subject. Rule 2. All work must be completed between midnight and 4 a.m. Never remain in the catacombs past dawn. Rule 3. If a body shows signs of movement during procedures, immediately apply the silver restraints and notify the duty priest. Rule 4. Never remove any jewelry, clothing, or artifacts from the subjects. Report all anomalous items to the archival department. Rule 5. Maintain constant verbal documentation while working. Silence in the catacombs attracts unwanted attention. Rule 6. If you hear your name called from empty corridors, do not respond and do not investigate the source. Rule 7. Never enter Chamber 13 under any circumstances. This restriction supersedes all other duties. These rules exist because previous morticians who violated them required our services themselves, Monsignor Toretti explained. The Vatican maintains certain arrangements with entities that require specialized care. Your expertise ensures these arrangements continue peacefully. That first night, Monsignor Toretti led me through a hidden passage behind the main altar of St. Peter's Basilica. We descended stone steps worn smooth by centuries of use, past iron doors with locks that looked older than the Renaissance. The air grew colder with each level, carrying scents of preservation fluid, ancient incense, and something else I couldn't identify. The catacombs stretched endlessly in all directions, lit by electric bulbs that cast harsh shadows on carved walls lined with stone shelves. But these weren't the famous tourist catacombs filled with arranged bones. These shelves held bodies wrapped in silk shrouds, perfectly preserved despite their obvious age. My workspace was a modern mortuary facility built into a natural cave chamber. Stainless steel tables, modern preservation equipment, and chemical storage units sat incongruously among walls carved from living rock. A small office adjoined the main workspace, equipped with detailed logbooks dating back 400 years. "Your first subject awaits," Monsignor Toretti said, indicating a covered form on the central table. Cardinal Alessandro Torriani, died 1623. Requires standard preservation renewal. Document everything in the logbook. I began my examination under the harsh fluorescent lights. The body was remarkably well preserved for something nearly 4 centuries old. The skin retained elasticity, the features remained distinct, and there was no sign of decomposition. More unusual was the body temperature, not cold like a corpse should be, but cool like someone in deep sleep. Following Rule 5, I maintained constant verbal documentation. Subject: Cardinal Alessandro Torriani. Initial examination shows exceptional preservation. Skin tone normal, no visible decay. Beginning arterial preservation renewal. As I worked, I became aware of sounds echoing from the corridors outside. Footsteps, whispered conversations in languages I didn't recognize. and occasionally what sounded like chanting. Following the rules, I focused on my work and continued documenting aloud. The preservation process took 3 hours. I injected modern preservation compounds through the existing arterial network, refreshed the cavity preservatives, and applied new protective coatings to exposed areas. Throughout the procedure, the body remained perfectly still, though I noticed the chest seemed to rise and fall almost imperceptibly. As I was completing the final documentation, the body's eyes opened. I immediately stepped back and reached for the silver restraints mounted on the wall, thick metal bands designed to secure wrists and ankles. Rule 3 was clear about this situation. "Preservation renewal complete," I announced loudly, following the verbal documentation requirement. "Subject showing signs of movement. Applying restraints as per protocol." The eyes tracked my movements as I secured the restraints. When I finished, the lips moved slightly, forming words I couldn't hear. "Monsignor Toretti, preservation complete with movement anomaly," I called into my radio. "Acknowledged. Complete your documentation and prepare the subject for return to storage," came the reply. I finished my notes and helped transport the body back to its designated shelf in Corridor 7. The eyes remained open and alert throughout the process, following our movements but showing no other signs of consciousness. Over the following months, I developed a routine that kept me productive and, more importantly, safe. Arrive at 11:30 p.m. to prepare equipment. Begin work precisely at midnight. Maintain constant verbal documentation throughout all procedures. Complete preservation work by 3:30 a.m. to allow time for cleanup and storage. Leave the catacombs by 4 a.m. without exception. I learned to recognize the different types of subjects in my care. Cardinals and bishops from various centuries, several individuals in secular clothes from different historical periods, and occasionally subjects wearing garments I couldn't identify from any known culture. Most showed signs of movement during procedures, opening eyes, slight head turns, occasionally hand gestures. All required silver restraints as a standard precaution. None ever caused problems as long as I followed the protocols exactly. The work was methodical and, in its way, peaceful. The constant verbal documentation helped maintain focus, and the subjects seemed to respond positively to professional, respectful treatment. Several times I noticed subjects appearing to listen attentively to my procedural narration. During my 3rd month, I encountered my first serious test of the rules. I was working on a bishop from the 16th century when I heard my name called from the corridor outside. "Marco, Marco, we need assistance in here." The voice sounded exactly like Monsignor Toretti, and my first instinct was to respond. But Rule 6 was explicit about voices from empty corridors. I had confirmed before beginning work that the duty priest was conducting evening services in the upper basilica. "Continuing arterial preservation on Bishop Martinelli," I announced loudly, maintaining my documentation. "No interruptions during active procedures." The voice continued calling my name for another 10 minutes, sometimes urgently, sometimes pleadingly. It moved through the corridors, seeming to come from different directions. I focused on my work and kept narrating every step of the preservation process. When Monsignor Toretti arrived for the shift change at 4 a.m., I reported the incident. "You handled that correctly," he said. "Such incidents test new staff members. The entities that create those sounds are not malicious, but they are curious about our procedures. Engaging with them would disrupt the arrangements we maintain here." "What kind of arrangements?" I asked. "The Vatican provides preservation services for individuals whose deaths were complicated. In exchange, they respect our sovereignty and limit their activities to designated areas. Your professionalism helps maintain this balance." As I entered my 4th month, I learned more about the complex ecosystem operating in the catacombs. The subjects I cared for were organized into different categories: church officials who required preservation for doctrinal reasons, political figures whose deaths needed to be managed carefully, and individuals from various time periods whose preservation served purposes I didn't fully understand. My logbook entries revealed patterns in the work. Certain subjects required preservation renewal monthly, others annually. Some needed only minimal maintenance, while others required extensive procedures. The scheduling was managed by a complex system that considered both preservation needs and what the notes cryptically referred to as activity cycles. The most intriguing aspect was Chamber 13, which I passed daily but was forbidden to enter. The heavy wooden door bore multiple locks and was marked with symbols similar to those in my rule portfolio. Sometimes I heard sounds from inside, movement, whispered conversations, occasionally what sounded like celebrations or meetings. During my 5th month, a new subject arrived that changed my understanding of the work entirely. Monsignor Toretti escorted a covered form to my workspace at the usual time, but this subject was different. The preservation requirements were extensive and required techniques I had never used before. This individual died yesterday, Monsignor Toretti explained, but requires preservation methods typically used for much older subjects. Follow the advanced procedures outlined in the Red Manual. The Red Manual contained preservation techniques I had only heard described in theoretical discussions during my mortuary training. These were methods designed to maintain not just physical integrity, but to preserve something else, something the manual referred to as essential continuity. As I began the complex procedures, the subject showed unusual responses. The preservation compounds caused visible reactions in the tissues, creating luminescent patterns under the skin. The body temperature fluctuated during different stages of the process, sometimes warming significantly. Most remarkably, the subject began speaking during the arterial preservation phase. "You are new to this work," it said clearly, the voice carrying a slight accent I couldn't place. I continued my verbal documentation while applying the silver restraints. Subject displaying vocal anomaly during preservation. Restraints applied as per protocol. "The restraints are unnecessary," the subject continued. "I am cooperative with necessary procedures." "Beginning advanced preservation sequence," I announced, ignoring the conversation while noting it in my documentation. "You may respond to direct questions during advanced procedures," the subject said. "It facilitates the preservation process." I checked my Red Manual and found a footnote confirming this exception for advanced preservation subjects. "How long have you been working in these catacombs?" the subject asked. 5 months, I replied while monitoring the preservation compound distribution. "Excellent. You demonstrate proper protocol adherence. The arrangement here serves important purposes." "What kind of purposes?" I asked, genuinely curious. "Preservation of individuals whose continued existence serves various communities. The Vatican provides neutral ground for this service." Over the next 3 hours, I learned that some subjects were preserved not because they were dead, but because they required periodic maintenance to continue existing in their current state. Others were truly deceased but needed preservation to fulfill obligations or agreements made during their lifetimes. The advanced preservation procedures were designed to maintain both physical and metaphysical integrity, allowing subjects to continue serving their communities while remaining technically deceased according to official records. "The work you do here prevents conflicts and maintains stability for multiple groups," the subject explained as I completed the final preservation steps. "Your professionalism allows these arrangements to function peacefully." When I finished the procedures, the subject thanked me formally and assumed the still position characteristic of the other preserved individuals in storage. During my post-work debriefing, Monsignor Toretti confirmed the subject's explanations. "Some of our preservation subjects maintain awareness and limited function," he said. "They serve as intermediaries between different communities that might otherwise have no peaceful way to communicate. Your work maintains the physical foundation that makes their service possible." "How many communities are involved?" I asked. "Difficult to quantify precisely. The preservation arrangements here facilitate peaceful coexistence between groups that span multiple continents and several centuries. As I entered my 6th month in the position, I began to understand the broader implications of the preservation work. The Vatican's secret catacombs served as a neutral facility where individuals from different communities could be maintained in states that allowed them to continue serving diplomatic or administrative functions after their official deaths. My role was more significant than simple mortuary work. By maintaining the physical integrity of these subjects, I enabled them to continue facilitating negotiations, resolving disputes, and preventing conflicts between groups that might otherwise have no way to communicate peacefully. This realization came during a conversation with one of the long-term subjects, a cardinal from the 17th century who had been receiving preservation services for over 300 years. "Your predecessors have maintained my physical form for centuries," he explained during his annual preservation renewal. "This allows me to continue mediating disputes between communities that formed during my original lifetime. Without this continuity, several territorial conflicts would have resumed decades ago." "How many communities depend on these mediation services?" I asked. "Dozens directly, hundreds indirectly. The preservation arrangements here prevent cascading conflicts that could affect thousands of families across Europe and North America." The work began to feel more meaningful as I understood its broader purpose. Each preservation procedure I completed helped maintain peace and stability for communities I had never heard of, but whose welfare depended on the continued function of the subjects in my care. During my 7th month, an incident occurred that tested my understanding of all 7 rules simultaneously. I was beginning routine preservation work on a 16th century bishop when multiple alarms began sounding throughout the catacombs. Emergency lights activated, and I heard running footsteps in the corridors outside. My radio crackled. "Marco, emergency protocols in effect. Complete current procedures immediately and report to Monsignor Toretti's office." But I was only 30 minutes into a 3-hour preservation process that couldn't be interrupted without potentially damaging the subject. Rule 1 required completion of all procedures before moving to other duties. "Current preservation cannot be interrupted safely," I radioed back. "Requires 2 hours, 45 minutes to complete." "Understood. Continue current work. Maintain all protocols regardless of external activities." Over the next hour, I heard increasingly strange sounds from the corridors. Voices arguing in multiple languages, heavy objects being moved, and what sounded like construction work. Several times I heard my name called from different directions, but Rule 6 prevented me from responding or investigating. Most concerning was the sound of someone trying to open the door to Chamber 13. The attempts continued for 20 minutes, accompanied by frustrated voices and what sounded like electronic equipment. "Continuing preservation procedures on Bishop Castellani," I announced regularly, maintaining verbal documentation despite the chaos outside. "No interruption of active preservation protocols." The emergency lights flickered several times, and my preservation equipment showed power fluctuations, but the backup systems maintained stable operation. I completed the full preservation sequence while the disturbances continued around me. When I finished and secured the subject in storage, Monsignor Toretti appeared immediately. "Excellent work under difficult circumstances," he said. "The emergency was resolved, but your adherence to protocols prevented complications." "What kind of emergency?" I asked. "Territorial dispute between communities with overlapping interests. Your continued work on the mediation subjects allowed them to resolve the conflict before it escalated." The sounds I heard? Negotiations conducted in multiple languages, some of which require specialized equipment to facilitate communication. The attempts on Chamber 13 were groups trying to access resources they believed would help their position. What prevented them? The security systems, plus the fact that your continued professional work demonstrated that normal operations were maintained. This showed all parties that the neutral status of the facility remained intact. As I approached my first anniversary in the position, I reflected on how much the work had taught me about the complexity of maintaining peace between different communities. The 7 rules that had initially seemed arbitrary had proved to be essential elements of a system designed to prevent conflicts and facilitate diplomatic solutions. My preservation work had evolved from simple mortuary procedures to participation in a global peacekeeping system. The subjects in my care served as living bridges between communities that might otherwise have no way to resolve differences peacefully. The most remarkable aspect was how the rules created a framework that allowed all these different groups to coexist within the same facility. By following the protocols exactly, I maintained the neutral environment necessary for the diplomatic preservation services to function. During my anniversary meeting with Monsignor Toretti, he offered me a permanent position with expanded responsibilities. "The Church would like you to become Senior Preservation Specialist," he said. "This would involve training other morticians for similar facilities we're establishing in other locations and developing new preservation techniques for subjects with specialized requirements." The position included significant compensation increases and the opportunity to work directly with Vatican administrators to expand the preservation program internationally. "I accept," I said without hesitation. "Excellent. Your first additional assignment will be training staff for facilities in Prague and Montreal. Use your experience to teach others how these preservation arrangements can serve diplomatic purposes." Over the following weeks, I developed comprehensive training materials that covered not just the specific techniques and protocols, but the underlying principles that made the preservation diplomatic system work effectively. I emphasized the importance of consistency, respect for all subjects regardless of their origins, and absolute adherence to the rules that maintained the facility's neutral status. When the first group of new preservation specialists completed training, I personally supervised their initial assignments at the new facilities. Watching them successfully apply the techniques and protocols I had taught them was deeply satisfying. "You have become an excellent teacher," Monsignor Toretti observed after the 3rd successful facility opening. "The preservation diplomatic system is now operating in 7 cities across 4 continents. The work teaches important lessons about respect and professionalism," I replied. "I'm honored to share what I've learned." As my 2nd year in the position concluded, I felt profound satisfaction with the work I had chosen. What had begun as an unusual mortuary position had evolved into meaningful participation in a system that maintained peace and prevented conflicts for communities around the world. The monthly preservation schedule continued with its familiar rhythm. The subjects maintained their patterns and preferences, and I provided the same reliable service I had delivered from the beginning. But now I also knew that this work represented something larger, a successful model for managing complex relationships between different communities through respectful preservation of their representatives. During the December preservation cycle of my 2nd year, one of the advanced subjects made an unexpected observation. "The arrangement here has become a template for similar facilities worldwide," they said during their renewal procedure. "Your professionalism contributed significantly to proving these systems could work reliably." "Thank you," I replied while monitoring the preservation compound absorption rates. "More than that, the protocols you helped refine are now being used to facilitate negotiations between communities that had been in active conflict for centuries. Your attention to detail and respect for all subjects helped create a model for peaceful coexistence." After completing the procedure, I stood in the quiet catacomb chamber and reflected on this information. The preservation work I had learned to perform had apparently helped establish a global network of diplomatic facilities that prevented conflicts and maintained peace across multiple continents. When Monsignor Toretti arrived for our routine debriefing, I shared the subject's comments. "It's true," he confirmed. "The success of our preservation program demonstrated that such arrangements could work reliably over extended periods. Church officials worldwide have implemented similar systems, and the results have exceeded our expectations." "How many people have been affected?" I asked. difficult to quantify precisely, but the conflicts that have been avoided or resolved through these preservation diplomatic programs likely would have displaced tens of thousands of families and caused immeasurable suffering. I sat quietly processing this information. My simple adherence to mortuary protocols had somehow contributed to a global peacekeeping system. You should feel proud of what you have accomplished, Monsignor Toretti continued. Your reliability and respect for all subjects created the foundation for something truly significant. I just followed the 7 rules, I said. Exactly. And in doing so, you proved that consistency, respect, and professional protocols could bridge differences between communities that seemed impossible to reconcile. As I prepared to leave the Vatican that morning, I realized I had found something rare in modern work, a position that combined personal satisfaction with meaningful contribution to global peace and stability. The 7 rules that had initially seemed strange and restrictive had taught me profound lessons about respect, professionalism, and the power of consistent behavior in maintaining diplomatic relationships. Following them had not only kept me safe, but had helped create a model for peaceful coexistence that was now being used around the world to prevent conflicts and facilitate understanding between diverse communities. I walked home through the quiet streets of Rome as dawn broke over the ancient city, feeling grateful for the unexpected path that had led me to this meaningful work. Tomorrow would bring new subjects requiring preservation services, new challenges in maintaining the diplomatic balance, and new opportunities to contribute to global peace through professional mortuary work. The 7 rules would continue to guide me, and the preservation arrangements would continue to serve communities I might never meet, but whose welfare depended on the reliability and respect I brought to each procedure. My name is Marco Benedetti, and I'm a mortician for the Vatican's secret catacombs. The work involves preserving individuals whose continued existence serves diplomatic purposes for communities across multiple continents. The 7 rules exist for excellent reasons, and following them has taught me more about professionalism, respect, and the possibility of peace than any other career could provide. The preservation arrangements continue, the subjects receive the care they require, and the system we maintain together continues to prevent conflicts and facilitate understanding between groups that might otherwise never find peaceful solutions. That is sufficient purpose for any profession.